Indian-occupied Kashmir.
Modi and the Indian government want the world to believe that all is well in Indian-occupied Kashmir, but that is decidedly not the case. Join us and different guests every Thursday for insight into the latest developments in the Kashmiri freedom struggle.
Good evening, welcome, thank you for joining us. My name is Claire Bidwell. I'm a human rights activist and primary school teacher living in Scotland, and I'm here tonight with Mary Scully, human rights activist and political writer in the United States of America. Our guests tonight are Lee Rhiannon from the USA, an ex-senator and human rights activist. Good evening, Lee, thank you for joining us, or good morning to you.
Hi, I'm coming from Australia.
Brilliant. Oh yeah, thank you. And welcome to Mahmood Faiz as well from the UK, who is the chairman of the Lib Dem Friends of Kashmir and campaign leader, organizer for JKLF. Faiz, good evening to you. Thanks for joining us.
No, you're welcome. And good evening and Sat Sri Akal Namaste to all our great viewers and your ladies as well.
Thank you. So Mary, last week we had our first show and we were discussing insights into Indian-occupied Kashmir, with particular the news about Khurram Parvez, great concern about his arrest. This week we've seen the heavyweights of the human rights organizations weighed in with Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, and many organizations and people around the world writing to Modi, United Nations, etc. And the United Nations also getting involved. And we've seen today India denying any wrongdoing, that there's anything wrong with it. And it's the United Nations, in fact, and other people that are not understanding what it's like dealing with terrorists, to use their words. So it's been quite an alarming week. So it's good for us tonight to be joined by Lee and Faiz to discuss through this.
Yes, I think because like Kashmir Decide coalition is focusing on the campaign to free Khurram Parvez, Yasin Malik, Asif Sultan, and the other political prisoners, I think we will continue that. And with Lee, I wanted to ask you, Lee, you're working on the Kashmir issue in Australia, and can you talk to us about the public consciousness and understanding of the Kashmiri struggle in Australia, and if there's any news coverage about the arrest of Khurram Parvez?
There is a small Kashmiri community in Australia and they do a great job. They're in many of our capital cities. They've taken actions and organised events many times. But being frank about it, in the wider Australian community, really very little understanding. We're really at the ground level in building up awareness here. And that's partly because there is virtually a blackout. Our media rarely reports on Kashmir. The government is so close to the Australian government, they're very conservative, very close to the Modi government, while they are very critical of human rights abuses in China. When it comes to India, there isn't comment. So with regard to the issue for political prisoners and the shocking things India is doing there, and the latest arrest of Mifez, who has an outstanding record in working on human rights, highly respected by the United Nations, there hasn't been a word here except what you pick up on social media. So it's certainly one of the things that has attracted me to the Let Kashmir Decide coalition, is that it has a very important mandate that I think summarises issues, and people like myself, obviously I'm not Kashmiri, can get behind and support the struggle for self-determination in Kashmir.
Can you respond to the report about India's response to the United Nations, expressing its concerns about the arrest of Khurram Parvez and about the executions of many civilians in Kashmir? Could you respond to how India has reacted to that?
Look, I think it's a really pertinent question. I found it so disturbing. I picked up the information this morning when I was reading my news reports, and the Indian government has just rejected outright the United Nations. Like, this is a report from the United Nations responding to the arrest of Mr. Parvez. And India has rejected the United Nations Human Rights Office criticism of the arrest. They've called it baseless and unfounded allegations. So they're just rejecting it outright. Even though Mr. Parvez is very well respected, his reports of the coalition, the Jammu and Kashmir Coalition for Civil Society, that he has worked for well over a decade, is highly respected. It's used by well-respected NGO human rights organisations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty, as well as the United Nations itself. So this organisation and Mr. Parvez have outstanding credentials, and India is now just rejecting it outright. And I really think it goes hand in hand with what is going on in how criticism totally, so the world doesn't react with anger like we have done in the past about apartheid in South Africa, the war in Vietnam, what happened in East Timor, because we know it's critical to build that public voice. So I find India's response deeply disturbing.
One of the tenets of the mandate for the Let Kashmir Decide coalition has to do with defending political prisoners. Could you talk a bit, Lee, about what the Let Kashmir Decide coalition will be doing to defend not only Khurram Parvez, Yasin Malik, Asif Sultan, but all of the other thousands of Kashmiri political prisoners? What the Let Kashmir...
Well, I was very proud that
Yes.
Yes, I was very proud that one of the Let Kashmir Decide, we decided that one of our key objectives is calling for the release of all Kashmiri political prisoners. And this is really essential. It's again an issue of human rights. It's an issue of respecting the right of the Kashmiris to determine their own future. With regard to your question, what will Let Kashmir Decide? I believe that we will be becoming more active for, oh dear. Can you still hear me? It's dropped out.
You're breaking up a little, but keep going. Keep going. We can still hear you.
Okay, thank you. So Let Kashmir Decide has a clear objective for the release of all Kashmiri prisoners. I think our key job now is to mobilise around Mr. Parvez. That is gaining global headlines, particularly now with India's, really it's an attack on the standing of the United Nations, who have a very objective position on this. So I think that this is where we need to put our energy, mobilise more public voice, build awareness around the issue, and lobby our own governments to actually take a stand, because Mr. Parvez should not be in jail. And remember, he's been in jail already for a week, and he's been moved to Delhi. Why did they move people to Delhi and to other jails in India, a long way away from Kashmir, to make it harder for them to see their families, harder for them to see their support base, and makes it very difficult for us to mobilise. But we need to give Mr. Parvez and his community every support.
Faze, maybe we could move on to you. I understand that you belong. I'm sorry.
Could we just say could we say goodbye to Lee? I know we have to shoot away for some work. Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So there's sort of a connection problem there. Faze, not everyone knows about the organizations that you belong to. Not everyone that's listening will be familiar with Kashmiri politics. Could you tell us very briefly about the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front and about the kind of work that they do, so people have an idea of the work that you do?
First of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's great to speak across the globe to all the viewers. Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front is an organization that's a pro-democracy organization. It believes that Kashmir, instead of being a bone of contention between Pakistan and India, could be a breach of peace by reverting it back to its independence. Remember that India was under the British Raj and Pakistan was partner, but Kashmir was never under the British Raj and was always independent of India. So therefore, the two theory about Muslim is one side and Normal the other did not apply. It was independent. The show would be too long if I went into the history of it, but basically, the Indian army came in, Pakistan and Kashmir got caught sort of in between. Kashmiri people have no animosity towards the people of India or the people of Pakistan or people of Punjab for any matter. What they want to do is try and live in peace, prosperity, and build a democratic and liberal society. And the Jammu Kashmir Liberal Front believes that the best way to do that is to sort of have an independent Kashmir. So it's not involved in the politics of Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Great, thank you. I wondered if you could talk about the campaign to defend Khurram Parvez and how that ties into the campaign to for the release of Yasin Malik, Asif Sultan, and the thousands of other Kashmiri political prisoners who are being held in India's Gulag without any accountability. If you could talk about that and about the work that your organizations will be doing to defend them or have been doing to defend them.
Well, we've been defending anyway. Let me sort of exaggerate that. One of my qualifications is that I'm expert on the document IIOJk human rights, and of 30 articles and what they mean. And the present government at the moment of Modi has broken something like 27 of them. Again, for me to go through them, listen to argument would make the show far too long. And then what we're doing about it, if I just check JKTV itself is sort of working right across the spectrum for all prisoners and political prisoners of all categories, and the safety of the people of Kashmir. And I say people of Kashmir because a little bit I'm going to talk about the situation of the children, and that truly will be heart-wrenching. If you've heard the news, it will be heart-wrenching, really, and it's an uncomfortable subject, but I think it's important of that. Because here living in the West, we're sort of detached from the situation, what really goes on. But basically, if I tell that, imagine it this way. Imagine tomorrow, our Prime Minister of the UK put the English army into Scotland, arrested all the local politicians, cut off the internet, and just banned all the international reporters from entering, banned all international human rights, including Amnesty. And remember, the right-wing government of Modi has closed the account of Amnesty International, a very respected universal organization, human rights organization that I personally belong to as well. So that gives the people listeners in Australia, America, what kind of picture we're looking at. So that sort of draws your picture. Then you're going to look at where the actual BJP came. The BJP actually is a political arm of the RSS, which was actually started in 1920 after inspiration getting from the Nazis of Germany. So when you pair the two together, I want you to now draw a picture of what Kashmir must be like. The laws they've made in place make that an Indian soldier can shoot, kill, rape, commit arson, commit any crime, and is protected by the laws in India from civil prosecution. Imagine you had soldiers that could do that on the street. Picture that with the army, with the political agenda of a sort of where its inspiration has come from to the 1930s Nazis, 1920s of Germany, and the laws of that. So everyone has to be protected. The people do that. Come back to the idea of Khurram Parvez. Khurram Parvez and many journalists are arrested. They're not arrested because they committed any crime. They're arrested to bully them and to shut the argument off. The next time Khurram Parvez sees somebody being shot innocently, he keeps his mouth closed and does not report it.
Yes.
Current Pervez, the journalists in Kashmir, are risking their, I'll tell you viewers, that are risking their lives by reporting on this.
Yes.
They are heroes and human rights heroes. If they could not report, me 9,000 miles away, I could not do anything because I would think I would just go by what's the mainstream media is showing, which would be totally untrue. And I think we all need to work productively. Then there's the question of prisoners. Of course, I'm not sure where that law applies because the law, the understanding the government of Kashmir had with India that no, because it's a separate country, no prisoner from Indian occupied Kashmir could be moved to India. But because India is now sort of torn that paper and burned the bridge and everything, it's sort of just working as a, well, as an occupying force and taking prisoners far away from their families, not giving them any welfare. It's nothing more than bullying. And the other thing that's important, another thing that we in the West may find shocking, is that an Indian soldier, when he have you ever realized that whenever you get a report, you will say a suspected militant shot dead. You never hear a suspected militant arrested. Why is that? Well, for a start, it may not be a suspect militant at all. And the other one is they actually paid a bounty. An Indian soldier could kill, may have killed, or would have killed an innocent person, and he's actually rewarded by the right-wing government of India. How is that not go against all rules of normality, of which that's the law, and humanity? The struggle in Kashmir isn't for the people of Kashmir. Because when you have an injustice against anyone, regardless of the religion, creed, class, or group, it's not their injustice, it's injustice against everyone.
Yes.
And if anywhere it's been proven, that has been proven in India, where we saw injustice happening in Kashmir. Suddenly you had injustice happening in Punjab, with the Sikhs, with the land grab. So what we're going to do, we're going to sort of work globally. The international community must work globally, regardless of religion, caste, creed, sex orientation, anything, and work justice for all and equality for all. And that's what we stand for.
Let me ask you the same question I asked Lee, and that is, what, given the work that you're doing in the UK around Kashmir, what do you think is the public understanding outside the Kashmiri community? Is there a broad understanding or any understanding or any substantial media coverage of the arrest of Khurram Parvez?
Well, first of all, let me go to the issue of the public. Where, I mean, the Kashmir community came originally in 1950s. So it's a quite close, strong community base across the UK. And where do we have a base and our friends and neighbors understand the issue and know the issue? But where, for example, at somewhere where they may not have seen a person or may not have that much population, foreign population, they won't know about the issue. So that's, you know, but they're very well. I mean, we've got I'm the chair of Liberal Democrat Friends of Kashmir. We have Friends of Kashmir in the Tory party even now, you know, and in the Labour Party. So, you know, yes, people do know, and it is waking up. And sorry, just remind me, the second part of your question was?
What was the second part of my
The second part. What is the well? Let's look at what the intention, what we're doing about it, what we're doing.
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to go on the Liberal Democrat what we're doing, and obviously when we had the European Parliament, we raised the issue in the European Parliament of the human rights abuses taking place in Kashmir, and my colleagues spoke on that, and they were received very well. The European Parliament took the issue up. Obviously, we're not part of Europe, so that's there moved on to other things. Then becomes our shadow foreign secretaries. Our first shadow foreign secretary was Chuka Muna, and his inauguration speech when he first became the shadow secretary actually spoke about Kashmir, spoke eloquently at the party conference. Then comes to the our second shadow foreign secretary, who is Leila Moran. Now, people who listen may not know this, but Leila Moran is actually of Palestinian descent. She's a Christian of Palestinian descent. So she knows the issue of Kashmir and Palestine very well. And she again has spoke on Palestine, on Kashmir, and will continue to do so, and I'm in regular communication with her. Then we come up to the House of Lords. On the House of Lords, again, we have had a debate secured on the issue of Kashmir by Lord Qurban Hussain, and I think Lord Newby spoke on it as well. But so we're working right across the spectrum from sort of the level of national to international levels and to the higher house of the House of Lords. Then comes to local level. Well, local level, this is where JKTV comes in, because it's a very sort of movement that's in touch with the people as a large member base. And like Tea for Kashmir, they both are brilliant works of activism. And in Waltham Forest, which has a large Kashmiri community, we had a stall where we actually drank tea, Kashmiri tea, and that sort of invited people to drink tea with us and talk about Kashmir. That went very well, and we was very well received by the public. And cheekily, the market inspector sort of let us stay there, although we were not supposed to be there. But he himself understood the issue of Kashmir. Said, "Look, you're not supposed to be here, guys, but as far as I never saw you." And carry on. So I was there for a good 2 hours, and we raised the issue there. Me, myself, as chair of Liberty Defender Kashmir, I raised the issue of Kashmir with local parties across the UK constantly, and raised it with our membership and with our members of parliament. And we'll continue to do so and continue from there. So that's what we're doing. We're doing at local level, national level, and international. And that's how we have to work. We have to open up the debate, and we should all be speaking about it. The other person that sort of you may, I'll bring back memories for you. If you're a fan of EastEnders, you may remember there was a gentleman called Nasty Nick. Nasty Nick had a mother that he sort of poisoned in a few episodes of that. And well, he actually, his real name is John Altmore. He's the actor, and I met him in London. We spoke on Kashmir, and he also showed me he has spoken on Kashmir, and will continue to do and speak on Kashmir. Unfortunately, John Altmore also is very bad at social media and very bad at sort of replying to emails, which he said he was. So I'm in communication with him, and let's go from there. So the word is getting out, really, and that's what India's more afraid of, is people actually hearing the truth and knowing about the truth. I'll give you another example. I had a tweet from Twitter, and the tweet and the notification was that the Indian government had complained about my tweets, but Twitter also said that none of my tweets broke any rules or laws of Twitter. They'll simply say, Twitter, can you shut this guy up? Because why? Because he speaks sense, he speaks the truth. And no fascist right-wing government likes the truth, because they're very blinkered in their way. It doesn't matter whether it's India or wherever, but that's the nature of fascists. They're very blinkered. Only they're right, everyone else is wrong. And if anything goes wrong, it was due to somebody else 10, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, even 1,000 years ago. Nothing to do with them. And, even so what India is doing is actually shutting the arguments off. And that's a dangerous precedent, not only for the world to know the truth across the globe, but for the people of India. Because I can expect people of India to make a sound judgment when they only have one side of the argument, not the other. We have to try and defend human rights activists, journalists. And with journalists, I think we need to work closer with organizations like the National Union of Journalists. They have a solidarity with their colleagues. What are their stats? What can they do? What are they doing? These are things that we must ask questions of them. Then trying to get legal challenge, it's more and more difficult. What the government of India has done is coming to Kashmir, taken all the judges away and replaced them with their judges, with right-wing minded judges. And this is not just happening in Kashmir, this is happening in India as well. So, this you could argue that not only Kashmir is under occupation, but India itself is under occupation.
Do we have time for one more question?
Of course we do.
This is a little bit off phase. but I'm interested because of the relationship now, the new cartel that India has formed with Israel, the United States, and Dubai, and has had a long military relationship with Israel. I believe Israel was long ago contracted to train the paramilitaries for Kashmir. I'm wondering if you could talk about, because the relationship between Israel and India is so important to them, if you could talk about any collaboration between Palestinian solidarity groups and Kashmiri solidarity groups, because the issue of political prisoners is just as important to Palestinians as it is to Kashmiris. And I'm wondering if there's any inroads into a deeper collaboration with Palestinian groups.
I think, first of all, we have to think, why is India and Israel so close? They're not close because they're close in the, it's all about money. And the reason is that Israel is India, I think, is the third biggest importer of weapons from the West, and Israel sells the most weapons to India. So it's all about business and business agreement and how much money Israel can make out of India and how much the West can make. And that may be some of the reason why the West doesn't sort of speak so much about it. Second comes about the relationship of the Kashmir issue and the person. Well, look, as I said in the interview earlier on, that pressure of one is pressure. We're all oppressed. Freedom, struggle, freedom, one is trigger for one. So whether it's the Palestinians or in Myanmar or in China, you guys, it's a struggle for all of us. We all work collectively, and we we continue to work collectively to see as a group to see how. And I think that's the best way forward, really, because you will find the repressive governments do work collectively to repress. And then if they work collectively to repress, we have to work collectively to free people and give them the right of freedom to speak out and congregate.
Yes. I think that one of the things that most impressed me when I first got interested in the Kashmiri issue was the solidarity that Kashmiri protesters in Kashmir always showed for Palestinians, for the Rohingya, for
and for the Sikhs.
Yeah. I mean, it was a feature.
I can show you something. If you look at 1947, when there was the communal riots in Pakistan and India, there wasn't any in Kashmir because we've always been a tolerant liberal society. How long that lasted with the current regime, I can't answer that. But it's there. It's in our blood. It's within our genes. And maybe liberal Democrats are sort of that comes from our genes, really. So so a struggle of, and that's why we tend to not look at persons, but it's a struggle for everyone, and it's a solution for everyone. If someone that's oppressed becomes free, then there's more chance of the next person getting free.
Yes, thank you.
Brilliant. And I think, all the unity work and the raising awareness, I think we've tried to encapsulate in our international Free Yassin Malik signature campaign and all political prisoners. And Fez, I know you've done a lot of work, and I think we've all realized when we're doing that work, the dialogue that we're having with other people is just as important as gathering those signatures, because we're spreading the word through that way. So same with the solidarity. Fez, you're a big supporter of the solidarity. Now you've told me you're coming up with a good video for this 5th of December. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. So for anybody that's listening that is aware, then 5th of December is our next solidarity event to raise awareness and stand in solidarity with Kashmiris, sharing the news that's happening in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Exactly as Fez says, India don't want anyone to know, and then they're hiding this. So this is that opportunity for us globally to do that. Anybody that's not aware, what we do on the 5th of December is whether you come together for an event, whether it's with your family, friends, or on your own, a photograph of yourself with tea or an event with tea, upload it, hashtag solidarity for Kashmir, and share it on the internet. So there's a wee video here, if it's loaded properly onto the system, just to show what it's about for this month. So I'm going to attempt to play it, see what happens.
ना बुजुर्गों के ख्वाबों की ताबीर हूँ, ना मैं जन्नत सी अब कोई तस्वीर हूँ। हाँ मैं ना बुजुर्गों के ख्वाबों की ताबीर हूँ, ना मैं जन्नत सी अब कोई तस्वीर हूँ। दुनिया निंद्राई खाबा, निंद्राई खाबस, रोशे रोशे कोई तस्वीर हूँ। हाँ मैं कश्मीर।
Nice meeting you, Faith. Very nice meeting you.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think, again, a really insightful night, some great discussion, Mary, some wonderful questions. Thank you. And it's an honour to be here. You know, Scotland, England, Australia, America, meeting tonight and hearing. We've had some good viewing figures I've seen because the numbers come up, and some great comments, some support from people. So thank you very much. Fez, thank you. It's an honour to have you. And Mary, once again,
Yes.
thank you. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye. Bye. Bye.